Good morning to all of you. I'm glad to be a part of the second Alaska Defense Forum. I want to thank the organizers of your gathering, Mayor Ward and Brittany Smart. As you convene military, community, and business leaders from across the state, you are ensuring that stakeholders involved in the Arctic region are able to champion their respective needs and work towards the greater goal, the goal of defense of the homeland. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you for hosting this event, and thank you to the U.S. military in the Fairbanks-North Scarborough area. When I first took office, the Arctic was widely regarded as that great icy mass at the top of the world where few could exist. It was naturally defended border we could rely on to deter our adversaries. We felt so secure that there was even discussion of closing Eielson Air Force Base. The thought of closing Eielson shocked the community, and thankfully, many people, many of you that are there in that room today, made the case for Eielson, and boy, was that important. After much work done by the defense community, the view of the Arctic has certainly changed. We are no longer thinking of closing facilities up here. In fact, quite the contrary. We're expanding our presence. Over the years, we've advocated for the Arctic and Alaska at the national level. Our mission has always been to sustain and enhance Alaska's contribution to U.S. national security interests. And it is quite often with the input from many attendees at this event that the Alaska Congressional Delegation is able to ensure those contributions. My role on the Senate Appropriations Committee, along with Senator Sullivan's role on the Senate Armed Services Committee, helps to ensure consistent federal investments and authorizations in the state and the region. Our delegation has been relentless in advocating that the F-35s come to Alaska, and once the bed down is complete, Alaska will be home to more fifth-generation aircraft than anywhere in the world. And this is only possible because of the work that you all have done to make Alaska the clear choice for the Department of Defense, working with your delegation. To complement this and ensure operational tempo, we have secured the basing of additional air refuelers in Alaska. An additional 4 KC-135 Stratotankers with accompanying personnel and their families will be coming to Eielson, bolstering Alaska's role in homeland defense and power projection while bringing economic benefits to the community. We also continue to invest in sea power in the Arctic. Polar security cutters, or icebreakers, are now funded in the President's budget. To date, the Polar Security Cutter Procurement Program has received approximately $1.8 billion. The community predicted the value of a special facility devoted to the study of national security in the Arctic. So, in 2019, your delegation worked together to codify legislation creating the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies, the 6th DoD Regional Center. This center will provide a new venue to collaborate with our allies and our partners to advance shared interests for a peaceful and prosperous Arctic. The Secretary of Defense is moving forward with establishing the center, and we continue to receive updates from the Pentagon on that. Public and private partnerships across the state are in the process of developing the nation's capacity to effectively communicate in the Arctic. With appropriations in FY21 and fiscal year 22, the U.S. is well on its way to establishing new commercial broadband capacity in the Arctic with dual use, civilian and military technologies. It's clear to all of us that we need to update our national strategy for the Arctic, and we'll need to continue to revise it as our interests grow. And while we're gathered today as a defense community, it is important, it's vital, in fact, that our strategy offers a whole-of-government approach to the Arctic, involving all facets of our federal, state, and local governments, Alaska Natives, incorporates science and technology, and harnesses our natural resources. The rewrite of the national strategy for the Arctic region is underway, and the National Security Council staff ensured the Alaska delegation that Alaska and Alaskans will be involved in the process, which surely includes many of you here today. Of course, we are not the only ones with a national interest in the Arctic. Competitors such as Russia and China have also been steadily increasing their respective investment in the region. About a year ago now, our Coast Guard and even my staff were receiving anxious calls from a U.S. fishing fleet in the Bering Sea who felt threatened with the Russian military exercise that was operating so close to U.S. territory. The exercise by the Russians, which was the largest in that area since the Cold War, made a strong impression and really drove home the seriousness that Russia is placing on their security in the Arctic. China, for its part, has declared itself a near-Arctic nation. Earlier this year, top Chinese diplomats came to Alaska to meet Secretary of State Blinken to discuss high-level international affairs. The location was considered mutually convenient, but I think it was pretty clear that China came to the United States to talk international issues on the doorstep of the Arctic. And when Dan and I met with Secretary Blinken after their meeting with the Chinese, we emphasized what is at stake in the Arctic and what Alaska has to offer, not just for the Arctic, but across the entire Indo-Pacific theater. Secretary Austin underscored this several weeks ago at Eielson when he said that his visit was a keen reminder of just how strategically important Alaska is to our national security and to Homeland Defense. He shared, and I quote, "We are an Indo-Pacific nation and we are an Arctic nation. And here in Alaska, those two critical regions intersect." All of this interest in the Arctic benefits Alaska. Year after year, the military spends billions of dollars in Alaska on personnel, defense contracts, and military construction. And the release of service-level strategies across our military branches will certainly lead to more investment and attention to the state. But at the end of the day, the most important asset that we have is people. The intense focus on the strategic aspects of our state and the push to do more to serve the interests of national security can sometimes overlook the challenges and hardships associated with being a service member in what can be an isolated region. One of the most important roles that the local community can play is supporting the person wearing the uniform and his or her family. They're here to do an important job, and they must also feel like an important part of the community. Throughout the global war on terror, with our focus trained to the Middle East, the role of the local community has very much been as a caretaker to troops when they rotate back from deployments. But with the onset of the new Arctic strategies, this pattern is changing. Troops are being asked to perform their duties here in Alaska. I applaud the effort the Fairbanks North Star Bureau has put into ensuring that those who come to Alaska and move into this area are able to live comfortably and to feel welcomed. The military leadership here has made great strides to institute key initiatives to help ease the transition to Alaska and ensure a better quality of life for those that are already here. Among these benefits are items like incentive pay for service in Alaska, child care, and MWR facilities. We're also working together to ensure that military spouses with professional licenses in one state are recognized elsewhere. Military spouses should not be denied employment when transitioning to a new duty station. This is all good, but we know we can always do more to make certain America's service members feel at home in this great community. I know that there are many, including in this audience, who have ideas that will make life for service members and their families better. So let's share those ideas. It really is incredible to think how far we have come in the last 20 years. Eielson is bustling with activity and the expansion continues. As the Secretary of Defense reminded us, we are in the right place to project the awesome power wielded by the U.S. military in the Arctic and the Indo-Pacific regions. Secretary Austin recognized our state for the world-class training resources that you have helped build up. We have new Arctic strategies, new investments, and a bright, yet challenging and exciting future. The Alaska Defense community is at the forefront of all of this and is poised not only to contribute, but to be the beneficiary of this mission. So keep up the cooperation and the commitment to do good. Thank you all. I wish you a most productive conference. Take care.
Hello, Alaska Defense Forum, and greetings from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for the opportunity to say a few words. And I think on so many issues, we're all very much aligned. Let me talk about some of those issues. You know, one of the things I love to talk about is what I call Alaska in terms of our military. We constitute three pillars of America's military might. We are the cornerstone of missile defense, the missiles, the radar sites that protect the entire country, which is a hugely important issue because of our strategic location. We are the hub of air combat power for the Arctic, in Asia Pacific, more than ever now, which by the end of the year, we'll have over 100 fifth-generation fighters, F-35s, F-22s in Alaska, and we are a platform for expeditionary forces that can deploy on a moment's notice to anywhere around the world, the 425, the 1st Stryker Brigade, because of our great training, our great men and women in uniform, our incredible Air Force assets, we can do that. I always mention, though, there's a fourth pillar of our military might, and that's you. That is our great community that supports our military. As a matter of fact, I don't think there's a stronger, more supportive community of our military, the U.S. military, anywhere in America but Alaska. We are it. So thank you for all of the great support you provide our military. It matters. It matters a lot. Let me give you an example. One of the most important jobs I see my role in is to bring senior military officials, civilians, and uniformed military leaders up to Alaska. Because what I like to say is Alaska sells itself. If you're a military leader and you get up to Alaska, you see the great community support, you see our strategic location, you see our incredible world-class training ranges, and of course you see the men and women in our military. You can't come away but being impressed. So impressed. So just in the last 3 weeks, I've had up in the Fairbanks area the Indo-PACOM commander, who's in charge of all the Indo-Pacific theater and all the forces, military forces in that theater, which, by the way, includes all Alaskan forces. And just this weekend, I hosted in Fairbanks the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. Now, Secretary Austin's visit, I can tell you, if you look at his press conference, how he talked about Alaska, how he saw it as so strategic, how he talked about more investments in Alaska given our strategic location. This is exactly why I try to get as many military leaders up to our state as possible, again, with the support of all of you. I'll end by just mentioning we also had an important week last week, in addition to hosting the Secretary of Defense in Fairbanks, but also marking up the National Defense Authorization Act. That's the Armed Services Committee on which I sit, marks up that bill that sets policy and the top line spending amounts for the Pentagon each year. We got a lot of good things in that bill, a few not so good things, but overall I think it was an important bill. Here's two major reasons why. Number one was Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma. He and I led the effort to say in the committee we are not satisfied at all with the weak Biden administration budget for our military, which unfortunately is supported by Chuck Schumer, Bernie Sanders. So we put an amendment forward for real growth to the budget of 3%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 25 to 30 billion additional for our military. That passed overwhelmingly in the Armed Services Committee. Every member, Democrat and Republican, voted for it, with the exception of one member. So that is a strong statement that the Biden administration's budget is certainly not doing enough for the military, and there was a bipartisan agreement that came out of the committee to do much, much more. That will benefit the men and women in uniform, including almost a 3% pay raise for them, and it will benefit Alaska, I have no doubt. Here's another provision in the NDAA that will benefit Alaska. I was able to get my Arctic Security Initiative in the bill, and every member, Democrat and Republican, supported it. So that's in the NDAA now. That goes to the Senate floor. What is this? The Arctic Security Initiative is similar to two different initiatives the Armed Services Committee has undertaken in the last several years. When we, the Congress, see that the Pentagon is not focusing on a region as much as it should, the Congress directs the Pentagon to look at funding, to look at strategy, to bolster our forces in these different regions. We did this for Europe when Putin was threatening our allies in the Baltics and Poland. That was called the European Deterrence Initiative. We did it with the Indo-PACOM region just last year. I co-sponsored what was called the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, particularly as it relates to the threats from China. And this year, right now in the NDAA, we've done it for the Arctic Security Initiative, which I authored. And I was glad to see every member of the committee supported it. This will make sure that the Pentagon focuses on force posture, continuing the buildup of our military in the Arctic to secure Alaska, our economy, but importantly, secure America's national security in the Arctic region. So, a lot of good news happening, even though, like I said, the Biden administration's budget is woefully inadequate. We're changing that. So, keep up the great work. Thank you again for your commitment to our military, to Alaska, to America. With your help, I see a bright future for our state in terms of continued military presence and buildup, given the importance and critical strategic location Alaska has for America.
Congressman Young was not able to join us today. However, I do have a few written remarks that I'll be reading on his behalf. Dear Mayor Ward, General Crum, military and civilian leaders, honored guests, colleagues, the Alaska Municipal League, and the Association of Defense Communities. Thank you for holding and attending this forum. I apologize that I could not attend, and I hope your discussions on this vital topic are productive. I'm glad to see that after years of work by the delegation to educate our colleagues, policymakers, and military leaders in DC, that they finally understand the true significance of Alaska. But we could not have done that alone, and you were all a critical part for that outreach. The Arctic's strategic significance cannot be overstated. From geopolitics to natural resources, Alaska will be critical to U.S. defense and foreign policy for years to come. That importance can be seen in the recently released Arctic strategies and the military's investments being made in the state. Moreover, it's not just weapons, platforms, and systems that show the military's commitment to Alaska, but also to their improvement for the quality of life of soldiers and airmen. I cannot speak highly enough of Major General Andresiak and the team at the U.S. Army Alaska for the investments and actions that they've taken to improve the lives every day of our soldiers. All of these actions will not only enhance the defense of our great nation, but will also have significant impact on the Alaskan economy, especially in the interior, for recreational activities and restaurants to real estate. However, we must remember that your communities will be more than just a destination for military assets. It will be a place that inbound service members will call home. So we must be ready to welcome them with housing, quality education, and spousal employment. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity, and I hope you have a great and productive forum. Congressman Young.